Así amaneció.
Siempre el tema climático es una de las noticias del año. El año pasado fue el año más caluroso en la historia del mundo. También hace pocas semanas se reunieron en el COP28, que es la 28ª reunión anual de las Naciones Unidas sobre cambios climáticos, donde gobiernos discuten cómo limitar y prepararse para el futuro. Para hablar de este tema, hemos invitado a la mesa al doctor Max Holmes, es un científico de la Tierra ampliamente citado y presidente y CEO de Woodwell Climate Research, que es un centro que organiza de organizaciones científicas que estudia y combate el cambio climático. Dr. Holmes, good morning and thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you.
Le voy a preguntar cuál es el balance del COP28. Doctor, what is your assessment of COP28 and what are the aspects that have surprised you the most positively and negatively?
Well, let's see. I think it's important to recognize with all of the COPs, the conference of the parties, that any agreement that comes out of there has to be unanimous. So you have to get all the nations of the world to agree, 98 nations or so, to agree to any agreement. So that's a very high bar, which makes it very difficult to reach an agreement with as much ambition as I would like. But that being said, there were some important outcomes from COP28 in Dubai this year. One was that for the first time, fossil fuels were mentioned as an important driver of climate change and necessity to reduce the use of fossil fuels. So that's important. It's unfortunate it took 28 COPs to get to that point, but that is certainly one important outcome. Another is progress on what's called loss and damage, and that's the idea that wealthier countries, developed countries that are most responsible for climate change also have a responsibility to help less developed countries adapt to the impacts of climate change that they're already seeing.
Bueno, nos dice que primero que es muy difícil llegar a conclusiones en el COP28 porque los 198 países miembros de la ONU tienen que estar de acuerdo. Ya desde ahí es muy complicado. Pero dice que las dos más positivas que él vio es que los fósiles, los combustibles fósiles fueron nombrados por primera vez en la historia de este COP y las formas de que hay que ver cómo se utilizan hacia el futuro. El otro cambio grande es que el segundo punto es que se resolvió que las naciones más grandes, las que más tienen dinero, tienen mucha más responsabilidad sobre el clima y sobre los países que no tienen tanto dinero en el día a día. Vamos con la segunda pregunta al doctor. ¿Qué consejo le daría a los países en desarrollo que enfrentan a los desafíos de adaptarse a los impactos del cambio climático? Doctor, what advice will you give to developing countries that face the challenge of adapting to impacts of climate change and reducing their emissions at the same time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I guess advice I would say is, number one, think about everything that you can do individually as your country to reduce your emissions so that you're not making the problem worse, and then use your voice to persuade the developed countries, as I said, the ones that are most responsible for the problem that we're facing right now, to step up and to do everything they can to, number one, reduce their emissions so the problem doesn't get worse, but also to help the developing nations to respond to the impacts that we're already seeing. And that, of course, is expensive. That costs money. And that's the idea with the loss and damage fund, that the developed countries would contribute funds to that, which would then be distributed to the developing countries to help them cope with the impacts of climate change. As I said, progress was made at COP28 on loss and damage. Funds are being contributed. I'll say that it's nowhere near enough money yet, not anywhere close, but at least the mechanism has been established, and hopefully the developed countries of the world will continue to step up and contribute considerably more funds to help the developing countries adapt.
Bueno, los países de tercer mundo como Ecuador, lo que dice es que tenemos dos cosas que podemos hacer. La primera, cualquier cosa que se pueda hacer para que en nuestra día a día podamos ayudar a que el mundo y el clima mundial mejore. Y el segundo, utilizar nuestra voz como país para que los países más grandes, ya nos lo dijo, tengan más responsabilidad y nos den más dinero para ayudar a la conservación del mundo. Básicamente esos son los dos puntos que dice el doctor. Señor Córdova, usted tenía una pregunta.
Sí, mi pregunta va para el doctor en relación a la burocracia que existe, no solamente en todos nuestros países, existe en Latinoamérica, en Norteamérica, en Centroamérica, en Europa, etcétera, etcétera, tanto político que realmente maneja el país y todos manejan el mundo. Es que si todo este tipo de reuniones realmente sirve para algo, porque yo tengo 53 años de edad, vengo escuchando el tema del cambio climático toda la vida. Y lo que yo veo realmente en mi país, por lo menos en mi país, porque es aquel donde vivo, que no pasa absolutamente nada. No pasa nada.
Dear Dr. Holmes, let's talk about bureaucracy. My colleague here says he's 53 years old and he's been listening to all these big countries and big nations talking about the weather, the climate, that last year was the worst ever was in terms of how hot it was. But it never, at the end, it never happens anything. That we still be doing the same things and the help is little. Do you agree with him?
I agree that it's frustrating that in 2024 now we are where we are. And again, this was the 28th COP that we just had in Dubai, and COP 1, we fundamentally understood the drivers of the problem: fossil fuel use and deforestation, land use change, secondarily, contributing greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. In a broad sense, we've known from the start what we need to do about that. That is, get off of fossil fuels and protect forests of the earth. And the sad reality is that emissions last year in 2023 were greater than they've ever been before. So I certainly understand the frustration with the bureaucracy, with the slowness to act. What happens moving forward? It's certainly possible that years down the road we'll still be talking as we're talking now, and emissions may continue to increase. And that would be a very unfortunate outcome, obviously, for everyone in the world. On the other hand, I think there's cause for hope. Renewable energy is rapidly expanding. Wind and solar are taking off right now. And one of the other sort of agreements that came out of this COP is that many of the nations of the world agreed to triple renewable energy production by 2030. Again, right now, those are just words, but it's an important goal. And in fact, another thing that gives me optimism in that sense is that renewable energy is now in most places of the world the cheapest energy to produce. So most of the new energy production, in fact, is in the renewable energy space. So that's an important step forward. I can't predict the future. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'd say there's lots of reasons to be hopeful that we're going to turn the corner. Emissions will start to fall. Renewable energy will take off. And there's lots of work that we all can do to push things in that direction.
Bueno, nos dice que entiende su frustración, Córdova, que él lo entiende porque desde el COP1 hasta el día de hoy han habido cambios, pero no cambios que podamos decir, wow. Por ejemplo, desde el COP1 sabíamos que usar las energías para cortar los árboles, sacar la forestación del mundo, usar gasolina, petróleo, diésel, los gases que se emiten, etcétera, ya lo sabíamos desde hace 28 años y que no se ha avanzado mucho todavía. Y que en el 28, la emisión otra vez de los gases, se vio que este año pasado fue la más grande de toda la historia. Que hacia el futuro, él espera que las emisiones de gases bajen, que las energías sostenibles como la del viento, la del sol, se tripliquen, porque el costo para producirla es mucho más barato que cualquier otra energía. Entonces, que él no puede predecir el futuro, pero por lo menos hay una luz al final del camino que nos ayuda a todos a poder saber lo que se viene. Le vamos a agradecer ahora al doctor Max Holmes por haber estado con nosotros. Doctor, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Happy New Year to you again.
Thank you. You too.
Era el doctor Max Holmes, es un científico y el CEO de uno de los centros climáticos más importantes del mundo, el Woodwell Climate Research Center, hablando aquí de lo que pasó en el COP28 y de lo que se espera en el futuro de